everyone, and welcome back to another GraphCMS Talks today. I'm joined by both Paresh and Filippo from VWO and Commerce Layer. We're going to be talking about high performance and personalization for e-commerce and why you don't have to sacrifice one for another. So before we get into it, why don't we start with a very quick intro? Filippo, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Filippo Conforti, CEO of Commerce Layer. Thank you for having me.
Right. Paresh?
Great. Hey everyone, this is Paresh. I head marketing at VWO. We are an A/B testing platform, and I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. And I am Ronak. I'm the VP of Marketing here at GraphCMS, a headless content management system based on GraphQL. Today, we've got a bit of a packed agenda, so we want to go over the evolution of what content commerce and conversion rate optimization has been so far, as well as look at what e-commerce really looks like in an API-first world. Then we'll get a bit into the expectations and the rise of omnichannel commerce before we go a bit more granular into how customer experiences really are future-proofed with a modern tech stack before we get into a few sort of discussions on how a modular DXP stack or a very sort of performance stack helps you deliver better customer experiences. So looking into content management, I think we're all familiar with the concept of a traditional CMS where you have your content and development teams working with a system that renders good experiences on a front end. The limitations we've seen when you look at WordPress or any of the legacy CMSs is you have a very tightly coupled infrastructure where the editors are working on one system that's defining what the front end finally looks like. And this is where you have the concepts of WYSIWYGs and page builders, where you have a very good editorial experience, but over time you start to see the sort of scalability of this infrastructure struggle, where you can't send this content in a very feasible way to multiple devices, to IoT devices, or to other digital displays. So this has obviously given a rise to the concept of a headless CMS, where you decouple the head or the front end from the back end, where you have your content infrastructure, and you deliver this content natively to all devices via API. In the case of GraphCMS, the way this works is editors and developers can define their content API, and they can create, edit, enrich, or curate any form of content that is then delivered to desktops, mobiles, TVs, or any smart device using their preferred frameworks like React, Vue, Gatsby, or any other modern Jamstack framework. I think once we see how content has evolved, it also makes sense to transition into how this affects the rise of modern e-commerce. So Filippo, would you like to give us a quick insight into the traditional to headless commerce direction?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty similar. I mean, the approach is very similar. First, let me define what traditional commerce means in this context. So, yeah, traditional commerce is e-commerce built with those platforms, those traditional platforms that were built to create desktop websites. And so they are typically monolithic applications that manage content and commerce and marketing and all the aspects that you need to build and manage an e-commerce website. Headless commerce is, as you said, you remove the head, you remove the presentation layer from your stack, from your platform, and actually, when it comes to commerce layer, to building headless commerce with commerce layer, you do something more or less depending on the point of view, because a commerce layer is really a platform that is specific to the commerce part, to the transactional part of e-commerce. So we leave all content management to best-of-breed content management systems like GraphCMS, and for sure we can work with the traditional ones, but since we embrace the headless approach, we prefer much more to work with the headless CMSs. And so it's not just about splitting the monolith between the head, the presentation layer, and the backend part. It is also splitting and making it very clear to that the content management and commerce management belong to different platforms. In this diagram, you see Commerce Layer and GraphCMS, and Commerce Layer manages the prices, the stock information, payments, promotions, customers, order shipments, and all that part. and GraphCMS will take care of the content with text, images, videos, everything. And so your platform is actually made of two systems and two APIs, two macro APIs. One is a content API, one is a commerce API that can deliver to different devices. In case of GraphCMS that supports remote fields, you also have an option to consider data from Commerce Layer as a remote field, as remote data that is then imported into GraphCMS and exposed through the same GraphQL API. For example, sometimes it can make sense to have the price, that is imported and delivered with the content. So yeah, this is in a nutshell.
Right, and that's interesting because content and commerce have both gone beyond the website, and that's also affected the way that we test and optimize those experiences. So Paresh, why don't you give us a little insight on how we've gone from this A/B testing to personalized experiments?
Sure. So if I think about my role as a marketer, right, in the past 10 years, the goals that we've been chasing have evolved a lot, right? So going from basic vanity metrics to running after traffic or running after, just clicks to conversion rate and whatnot, increasingly our goals have now merged with what the key business level metrics are, right? So impact is measured at business level. And this is not true for marketing. I believe this is true across all functions, right? Be it product or somebody who's responsible to run an e-commerce. And companies like Booking.com, Netflix, and others have time and again proven in these last 10 years that running very sophisticated tests to improve the experience of your audience plays a key role in how fast and how quickly you're able to grow. So that being said, A/B testing as a practice has evolved in these last 10 years as well, right? People started running a lot of tactical tests to start moving basic metrics, right? So, and then from there to this journey where it is become crucial to run more sophisticated and strategic A/B tests, more personalized A/B tests. If you think about it, right? So why do you run tests is primarily to start pushing people down a funnel, right? A funnel that is ultimately going to convert and get you that revenue. Now, if you what historically used to happen was we used to run a lot of tests like changing the button color or moving the image, and it was great, right? It's a great start. You get to start seeing quick wins, but at the end of the day, what matters, like I said now, and increasingly in the future as well, is going to be how much impact you have. And to be able to do that, you need to start stitching all these tests together in a journey. And for that, you need a lot of contextual data, you need a lot of behavioral data, and a right tech stack to be able to actually run strategic tests and be able to move that needle. So in a nutshell, that's how kind of the world has moved from just running very specific A/B tests on specific elements to personalized experiments across the funnel, across the journey.
Right. Thanks. I think that makes sense. And if we look at how we combine these together, that's really what we're all trying to achieve as service providers and vendors as well, is that we want customers to be able to provide that sort of modern experience that's high in performance, that's optimized to what their customers expect from them. So looking at what you take the old CMS or the old e-commerce approach where you're constantly building up and trying to hack around to find a solution that lets you achieve all of this. But then the sacrifice is always on the user side where they've got slow performance, they've got things breaking, and it's not ideal. So this is also a really good way for us to, let's say, transition into talking a bit about what e-commerce has become in this API first world and just how Commerce Layer fits into this perspective.
Yeah, so I think that the API first approach is all about flexibility, performance for sure, but the flexibility is something that is really needed in an environment that is no more about serving a desktop website and serving the same desktop website to all users, and so. Having an API first approach and using and combining different solutions, best of breed solutions to manage the different aspects of your stack is really key. For sure, this comes as a price at a price, because there are some challenges. You switch from a monolith, where you have everything. The problem is that very often, at least from my experience, you don't get what you need. I mean, you get everything, but not what you need. So it's a more realistic approach to say, okay, I use different tools for different things that I need, but there are some challenges. For example, you can have again, having one backend for content, one backend for commerce, one backend to manage A/B testing or personalization. Maybe it can be a challenge to someone, but the goal is to, and someone is this could also be a friction to transition from the monolithic approach to the best of breed. I think that the challenge is really to integrate these tools together more and more, and to build better integration so that you ultimately you build your stack, which is not a monolith, but it's a stack. It's a composable stack. It's something that you can compose with the different tools. But again, the goal and the challenge is to make them feel like a unique platform.
Right. It makes complete sense. I mean, it is a bit of a mental shift to, go from monolith to microservice and factor in everything that comes with it. But that's again, the perfect leeway into what omni-channel commerce is, because you made a really good point where there's a lot of backends and there's also a lot of backend potential, but it's about what works for me as an e-commerce platform or as an e-commerce player to, choose what my customers will benefit from. So when we look at how this transitions into omni-channel commerce, how do you see all of this fitting in?
Yeah, I think that if you think of the monolith is typically also a single channel application. Maybe you have some APIs and you can also support other channels. But what actually happens typically is that if you need to support different channels with a monolithic approach, you actually have to clone your single channel monolith, for the different systems. The API first approach let you natively support different devices that can be, online, offline, different type of devices. Like, we're not just about website. We're talking about native apps, IoT, voice, in-store, kiosk, something like that. So everything is really the presentation layer and the devices are really decoupled from the backend. And so the API first approach is really the only way to me to be really omni-channel. Also because there is a small difference between being multi-channel and omni-channel. If you want to be omni-channel, you're really saying, I want to support all channels, any channel, today and in the future. So this is also about being future-proof, because we don't really know if what the next channel, the next big channel will be. So embracing a headless approach today and then an API-first approach today let you be ready for any channel that will come in the future as well.
Got it. I mean, good points there. And looking at all of this, we also need to factor in that we can come up with a lot of changes and we can have a very modern first approach, but this also really needs to match what our customers expect from us. So if we start looking at how customer expectations themselves have changed, what do you think starts to be a lot more important? I think this is something for both of y'all, because it's both the personalization and the commerce that really plays a role here.
Yeah, I think that first, the customer journey is no more a straight line. So this is it's a journey, and the journey that can go through different devices and different. So the purchase process is not just I visit the website, I add to cart and purchase. It's no more like that. And so first this is why omnichannel commerce is so important. And I would leave Paresh to take on the personalization part, which is another very important aspect of that.
Right, sure. So the way I look at this is, like you mentioned, Filippo, the journeys have become complex, right? They're no longer, they were never in a straight line, but more so, increasingly, they're going to become even more complex, right? And while that is happening, the other big expectation is that everything needs to happen in the moment, right? Because when there are visitors on your site, they have a specific motivation, and because of this complex journey, it is even more difficult to capture them in the moment, right? So given how in the future this is going to get even more complex, the only solution I see that somebody can think of is building very very sophisticated tech stack, so that you are absolutely able to use multiple data points across multiple systems, and then be able to attack that problem, right? And of course there's not going to be a single answer to do that, but doing multiple things is needed, and a very important thing to build today to be able to be future ready is that tech stack which talks to each other, right? That's the key, at least in my opinion.
Right. And yeah, and talking about expectations, let me add that in talking about expectation in an omnichannel environment, the consistency is very important. So the customer expects to be treated as one customer, regardless of the channel that they are and the touch point that they're using to interact with the brand. And so the expectation, apart from the performance, the security, it's the consistency that is very important. And again, doing it with many platforms that manage different channels is very hard to maintain that consistency. Actually, having an API first approach with a single, more platform, but specific to a specific set of functionality, lets you be consistent across all channel and on a global scale.
Got it. I mean, good points, because again, the users themselves are global, and I think on average we all have multiple devices now. I think the last average was 3.5 to 4 devices a person. So bringing that personalized experience with consistency is really starting to be very important going forward. But okay, I think this is also where I need to sort of step in and talk about how marketing deals with these. We love the whole API first approach. We love high performance, but marketing tends to come in the way. And I'll be very honest when I say this, my developers share this frustration with me, where I want a high performance end experience, but I'm also the one impacting that. So just to see how this sort of fits in, we've all heard that, the whole Amazon quote where 100 millisecond delay gives you approximately 1% in lost revenue. It's become a really commonly quoted statement, where speed really means sales. So what was interesting was when we took a look at one of the top retailers in the US and did a sort of tear down on their performance. They've got a PWA, they've got mobile apps, and they have a very heavy presence in e-commerce. And what we saw was that for such a heavily competed space, where you have over 350 million sessions every month with a sales volume of more than 5 billion, things are important. Every second matters. And what we've noticed was that the amount of scripts that were running on this website, from everything from tag management to ads to tracking, analytics, personalization, and so on, it really has a very noticeable impact. I think when we ran this audit from, since it's a US website, from the US servers, we saw that they had a performance of about 30, which is, it's bad. There's no way to sugarcoat that. They've done a really good job at making a visually good website, having all their SEO in place, and sort of taking care of several best practices. But taking 7.5 seconds to load that website was painful, even to us, while we're auditing it. So it's probably just a lot worse for an end user. But the moment you block those scripts, right, you see your performance double. It went from 30 to 66, and it had a load time of less than 3 seconds, which is a huge improvement. And this is just by taking out all the marketing scripts that were running. So it had nothing to do with their actual stack. And this also got me thinking, when we're having this conversation about going with an API first approach, looking into how server side has benefits over client side, and just improving your tech stack from this modular DXP approach, there are so many quick wins that can be done for companies to de-risk their migration from a monolithic to a microservice architecture, where they can just start taking these incremental steps of improving their current implementation before looking into refactoring their stack. Because I'm sure that this 66, if you take out what all the legacy systems they're using and go with a real modern best of breed approach for their content, for their commerce, for their MarTech, I'm sure this could easily be in the high 80s to the 90s, which then converts to revenue at the end of the day. So the impact that you can really say on this with each second that they take for their page load is they're really losing out a lot on their potential conversions and on their page views, because I mean, users would get frustrated and bounce. It's a really bad indication to your buyer satisfaction. And I think it was the Aberdeen group where they did this huge study where 1 second in delay gave about a 16% drop in buyer satisfaction, because you also have a 7% loss in conversions and 11% fewer page views. And this also impacts your SEO. So going forward, it's not only the user who's on your website, you're also taking away the ability for others to find you. And this also got me thinking on how can we improve this, right? From the approach that we're talking about, where you can have a better technical implementation, which sounds expensive, but if you're taking it in incremental steps, really auditing your stack, seeing what you need and taking care of what you might need in the future, there can be a lot done here. Like you said, Filippo, I mean, there's so many options for backends, but you don't need one that does everything for you. You just need the select few that do what you want them to do. And that's only something you're going to get from a best of breed approach, where you're not being suckered into feature bloat, where you're paying for things you don't even use just because they're there. And I think that's what makes an important transition to go towards a modernized stack, where marketers and dev teams can take a look at the bigger picture, see how everything that they do impacts the end performance, and just work closer towards giving a much stronger and high-performant end user experience. I don't know, Paresh, what are your thoughts on this, or Filippo as well?
Yeah, just to add a quick consideration about this migration. It's true that can be you want to do it gradually, but you can also consider that if you switch from a monolithic approach to a best of breed approach, this will be probably the last platform that you do.
Right.
This is now in the future. I expect not to have the other replatforms, because the replatforming means switching from one monolith to the other. Here you will have at least micro replatforming, because you will switch your content platform, your commerce platform, your personalization platform, search, but you will still have you will do it forever gradually. It will be very the investment will be worth also for that reason.
Yeah, just plug and play once you've done your first major replatform.
Exactly.
And what do you think, Paresh? I mean, it's a bit of a biased question because we're both marketers in this case, but do you have anything to chime in here?
There could be no better validation than this, right? So I was speaking to Ronnie Kohavi, who I think late 2019, November 2019. He used to lead the performance team for Bing, Microsoft Bing at that point. And he has like 50 patents to his name, and really his only goal was he had an army of, I don't know, 15, 20 people, but his only goal was to ensure that the performance of Bing, right, from a speed, from overall perspective, does not drop, because they used to follow and they did this study and they figured out every 0.1 second, right, which is every millisecond, is worth $18 million for Bing, right? So drop in 0.1 milliseconds, they actually could come down to a figure and say, that's worth 18 million for us, and that's why we need this team. And so there's no better validation than that for me, to prove what you're saying, and it's absolutely critical in my mind.
Agreed, 100%. I mean, at that scale, the impact of each second really matters. And even on a lower scale, where you look at most of the major e-commerce platforms, each second really is millions in revenue. So that's a really valid point. I love it. But yeah, this then I guess is where I put the ball on your court, because if we're talking about the speed optimization and about how things really matter at that scale, how do we see this going forward when we look at moving away from conversion rate optimization, like you said, with the button improvements and the CTA changes, to really talking about a more customer experience optimization?
Sure. So, I kind of structure this into two parts, right? So one is when we start doing conversion rate optimization, right, and we start with where we picked off, where we kind of left earlier is it's a good start to start with running smaller tests and doing those button colors and all of that stuff, right? But ultimately, you need to add a code, and it's a client side and it's easy drag and drop and stuff like that. But once you get to a point, right, where you need to move from incremental changes to strategic tests, right, and the kind of strategic tests that actually move the needle could be pretty complex in nature, right? Like right from testing a search algorithm to testing like recommendations based on hundreds of data points, and a typical client side drag and drop editor wouldn't be able to handle that, right? So before I kind of get into that, what I want to do is just throw some light on like CRO from a very basic perspective, right? Conversion rate optimization is very internal looking. Most folks start doing this from very simple goals, right? Like I want more people to add stuff to the cart, or I want more people to click on read more description, and which is a great start, right? And that's the goal they start with. But the challenge though is that if you look at these goals, they're very internal looking, right? This is what I want. This is what is going to make me achieve some internal metric or internal goal. So the first thing that needs to happen is that shift in mindset, right? Of instead of understanding or looking at what I care about, right, or what my business cares about, to what my customer cares about. Now, a lot of people could argue that ultimately testing even internal looking metrics can can tell me what my customers are looking for, right? Because something is going to win, something is going to not win. But think about that, right? If you're testing that and you're seeing some good results, the moment you start getting more data points and start looking at this holistically and start looking at it from an external perspective, your amplification of those results are going to be much better, right? They're going to be a lot more. So from that perspective, now think about customer experience optimization, right? So as we discussed, the moment you start adding all these variables, all these contextual data and behavioral data, and trying to stitch that entire journey from even a testing perspective, you can kind of literally mix and map all different cohorts end to end to their journeys, and build tests and figure out what your clients really need or what your customers really care about. You can create very specific custom dimensions for your business, right? If you have a well integrated stack, all of this is possible, right? Bringing in purchase data, bringing in browsing behavior, all kind of interactions, custom events, anything that you really care about, building multiple variations by pushing content dynamically from an intelligent CSM. So all of this sounds complex to begin with, but ultimately, again, coming back to the same point, if you have great integrations, if you follow the API first approach, you can actually build this and be able to kind of take advantage of that. Just quickly kind of showcasing, like as an example, I've showcased in this example, it is just that you're bringing in location, device type, and source. But just imagine if you can add so much behavior and context, right? You could build a lot of different cohorts. And in the next slide, I've also kind of just given very specific example of product subscribe, right? If you want to get to the level of very, very specific product subscription, or very specific age, plus if this person was a previous subscriber or not, you can add so many variables and come up with that journey, right? So that's kind of the thought process that you need to start thinking about, of moving from conversion rate optimization to a customer experience optimization. Now, the second part is obviously the speed, right? The moment that I discussed in the beginning, the moment you start bringing all of this together, performance is something that you worry about. And if you look at the next slide, the server side testing is a great option for not sacrificing performance and still being able to serve all of these variations, right? So instead of creating these variations on client side, if you have a well integrated tech stack, you will be able to use VWO SDKs and host all of these tests on your server. And there could be constant handshake between your content and your variations of the test and your server, where any updates that you make can quickly be sent, but you're still serving everything from your server across all devices. And not sacrificing on the performance and yet being able to deliver that experience. So this is how you need to start thinking about mindset and then obviously performance as well, right? Both go hand in hand, in my opinion.
Right. I think we're all dealing with this mindset shift, because it's not only for commerce and content, but the whole monolithic to microservices and API first and headless approach. But even in the MarTech stack, there's so much happening on server side and cross platform that it is quite some getting used to. But okay, so we've had this really great conversation on how, commerce, content, and personalization sort of move towards the future, but it's equally important for most of our businesses that we work with to understand how their overall stack matches up in this case. And I think we were talking about this earlier as well once, Filippo, where there is an exploding landscape in headless commerce itself. And I'd love for you to share your thoughts on where this entire scope is headed.
Yeah, so first, again, e-commerce is made of many parts. There is authentication, there is search, payments, tax, shipping, fulfillment. There is a lot of functionality that you need to produce, to build a customer experience. In the slide with the headlesscommerce.org, which is a great resource where you can find a lot of different applications, APIs that you can choose from and build your stack. About the commerce platform, the one that we care more, that we are more focused on. Let me say that in general, first up, there are some options that this is not true just for e-commerce. This is true in general, probably, that headless is not for everyone. It's not for every project. So, and there are some platforms that makes a lot of sense if you are not ready, for example, to go headless. For sure, if you're a small merchant and if you want to start selling online, Shopify or BigCommerce are great options, And so if you want to start trying the headless approach, you can try using Shopify Headless or BigCommerce Headless. That is not native to those platforms, but it can work, if your requirements are not that high. In other cases, if you really want to embrace the Jamstack approach, for example, and to be truly headless, you can start exploring platforms like Commerce.js or Snipcart, which is great. I love it. It's so simple that you just drop a JavaScript code in your page and you make it shoppable. You drop a very nice shopping cart in your page. Commerce Layer is more an enterprise-grade platform. Is more targeted for enterprises, and another option is for sure Commerce Tools. Another very very good option that you can choose from in the landscape. So many options, and headless is not for everyone, but if you decide to go headless, you have a lot of options to choose from.
Right. And I think the same principle really applies to the overall digital experience, right? I think when the three of us were working together on the DXP report last year, what we noticed is that this same explosion in the landscape exists in nearly every component of a DXP, so to say. So you're no longer bound to the monolithic approach, even for marketers or for omni-channel experiences where, you can have your headless CMS, but given that they are so API first, you can really pick and choose your favorite CDPs, your CRMs, your ERPs, your voice devices. It doesn't matter. You're no longer bound to any sort of vendor lock-in, just because there are so many great platforms now taking this API approach that a majority of platforms just work together, and it's very easy to make them communicate with one another. And this is particularly true for e-commerce, because earlier this year itself, actually, I think in this month, Adam Starrock was taking a look into what this explosion looks like for e-commerce, and he had some really interesting results where you have so many options to really wireframe this resilient best-of-breed architecture using, like you said, the cart, the commerce, the warehousing, the fulfillment, the payments, the content, the personalization. There's a lot, and you really are in complete power of what tech stack you use and how you want to implement this. So I think this is also a very important point to note with this mind shift that we've been talking about, where thinking about 5 or 10 years from now, you really need to start considering this best of breed approach, because you don't want to wake up one day and see that you're not competitive anymore, and everyone's got a much better stack than you, which is obviously converting to more revenue and better customer experiences. So exciting times for e-commerce, that's for sure. There's a lot happening in the space, and it's to me at least, I'm very interested to see where most of these sort of architectures land up and what people end up making out of them. So I think, in summation, this entire conversation we've had of moving between commerce, content, and personalization, I think we can all walk away with some, with a key understanding that it really is about your mentality and your forward-thinking expectations from what you want to deliver in the future and how your stack matches up, but also how this can scale, because going forward you really want to focus on your business model more than maintaining it with a monolith and several other IT headaches. So what are your opinions, that just like a quick one line of just one piece of advice you would say for anyone looking to modernize or improve their e-commerce experience management going forward? You can kick us off, Filippo.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is maybe I repeat myself, but going headless is something that is really important to be future-proof, as you say, and scalability to scale to scale both in terms of the performances for sure, to scale in terms of the devices that you support today and tomorrow, and also to scale globally, because we didn't mention too much about the global, how important it is to sell globally, and how important it is to be present everywhere, to sell everywhere, so potentially everywhere in different markets. And for sure, you can do it with also with the traditional platforms. But again, when you want to sell internationally, it's flexibility becomes even more important, because each market, each region has different requirements in terms of localization, in terms of the prices, the regulations, everything is really localized for the specific regions. And the API first approach is flexible by design, and let you approach different markets in a more custom way, from in a more easier than the traditional monolithic approach.
Love it. What about you, Paresh?
Right. So when you ask summarize with one thing, the first thought that came to my mind initially was, we spoke about API first a lot. Customer first also is something as critical, right? But again, right, I feel over the period of time, the more I speak to a lot of people and our clients and others, I think everybody realizes that, right? I mean, there is nothing or there's no debate around it. The challenge that I've seen is, while people embark on that customer first journey, they don't match the tech stack journey along with it, right? I mean, they've seen a gap between the journey that they want to go on from a customer first perspective and personalization, but they don't tend to ensure their tech stack is also upgraded to that level. And with what you said right now, because of headless and API first, you can have the best of breed of all kind of tech and still be able to achieve what you want to, because they talk to each other.
Right.
I think that would be the key takeaway, right? Both those journeys have to go hand in hand. That would be my final thought.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, great points. And I think to start wrapping things up, we've also had a couple of questions come in. Obviously, we requested for a few questions while registering for this webinar, and I've taken the liberty of sort of compiling them into being a bit more thematic, so to say. So why don't we start with you, Filippo? One of the sort of questions that came in was, does a cross-device strategy for e-commerce matter? And my interpretation is whether you can just go in with what you have now, or whether you need to fragment this for each specific device.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that is about commerce, is about personalization as well. So maybe Paresh can also bring in something. But I think, yeah, it definitely matters for what we said about the importance of being omnichannel, of embracing an omnichannel approach. And so having a consistent giving a consistent experience to the different devices is very important. Then for sure, each device has a different let me say, requires a different user experience. And so this is more for you and Paresh. And so the personalization, not just for the user, but also the personalized experience for device, it's really important as well. So I think, again, having a strategy that lets you be consistent cross-device, across all the devices, it's mandatory. And then you want to really personalize the experience of your customers also by device. This is my opinion.
Paresh, do you have something to weigh in on this?
Right. No, I absolutely agree. The way I always think about it is when I am on an e-commerce site, or when I am out there, my expectations are what my customers' expectations are going to be, right? So not only cross-device, I think in future the expectation will also be the offline-online conversion, right? Like cross-device strategy along with offline strategy, giving a consistent experience throughout is probably going to get critical, and obviously a very difficult problem to solve. But yeah, couldn't agree more to Filippo. Absolutely important.
Got it. Right. The next one is on how personalization impacts cross-platform commerce, and I think this also ties into performance quite a lot. So, what are your thoughts on this, Paresh?
Right. So yeah, I think we've covered this point a lot, right, during the presentation, and I think even in the last question. So personalization, while absolutely important, because it has to get in data and context, and you have to have interpretation of all of that as well, right, across multiple platforms. That's the challenging part, right? So again, very critical that all your systems are talking the same language, or you're able to interpret everything, to be able to give the right kind of experience, right? Because personalization can go terribly long as well, right? So I don't know if you know, I mean, there was this thing in the US where a very large store, e-commerce store, knew that a girl was pregnant even before their daughter, right? Because she had purchased something and they started sending emails out. So I mean, it could be tricky, right? So I can't stress enough on the importance of the right tech stack again to be able to do this right.
Got it. All right. And then I think this one is also a bit more in your direction, where what are some of the key differences in client-side and server-side testing for modern apps?
Right. So I think this is very straightforward, right? The first part that we spoke about, running simple A/B tests, right, very easily can be run client side, because it obviously doesn't slow your systems down a lot, right, or your performance down a lot. But the moment you start moving into personalization based testing and customer experience optimization, the complexity of testing is going to get very, very high, right? And when that happens, you need to use the power of server side testing to able to match your performance and your journey of personalization and giving great customer experience. So the moment you graduate from running very basic tactical tests to running strategic tests based on customer journey is the right time to evolve from client side to server side, in my opinion.
Got it. All right. And then, okay, I think this one's more in my ballpark with, doesn't a DXP take care of all this? And well, by all this, it's everything, because that's what a DXP does. Yes and no. So in my opinion, DXPs also are seeing this transition from the monolithic DXP to the modular DXP. And in my opinion, a monolithic DXP is definitely going to take care of all of this at a very expensive cost of feature bloat. So most modular DXP, well, most monolithic DXPs would come with your CRM, your ERP, your stock management, your payments, your content, all bundled into one, where you have this end-to-end experience of running things from one platform. And like Filippo mentioned earlier as well, this is your one backend to do everything, but it's going to slow you down. It's going to be expensive. You usually need specialists to maintain it, because you need people who are really well versed with that one platform and one stack to constantly extend on it. You constantly have issues with the infrastructure, the scalability, the security of platforms, where you can't sort of ignore it and let it run on autopilot, or change a component when something doesn't work to your needs. And I think this is where that mindset shift comes again, where you look at, okay, I need all of these done, A, B, and C, but I don't want to do it with a full stack suite, which is going to be expensive and hard to maintain in the long run and slow out my performance. So I shift to this modular DXP approach where I'm picking the best of breed platforms where I need payments, I need commerce, I need content or personalization, and I choose GraphCMS, Commerce Layer, VWO, Stripe, and build something myself that's giving a much more flexible stack that I can extend and control better in the future. And that's my take on it. I think the next one is can personalization at a granular level scale? Oh, okay. Can personalization at a granular level scale without affecting performance? Interesting.
So, Ronak, you answered this in the last question when you said, and the answer is yes. And when you said, get VWO, get Commerce Layer, get GraphCMS, and other best of breed tools that you need, and with those you'll be able to do it. So, in short, the answer is yes. But I think you covered it in your last question as well.
Comes down to the stack at the end. Right. And I think, I think this is the last one for Filippo and me. Why go headless when some suites handle all aspects of content and commerce? Filippo, I'll let you take over this because with content, I'm very biased and I can go on because it's WordPress versus GraphCMS for me.
I'm very biased on commerce, but in general, I would say that to answer this question is essentially because content and commerce are really two different things, and and managing two things as different as content as commerce with the same tool, with the same platform doesn't make much sense today, at least. So commerce has to be, must be secure, must be, you don't, it's not that innovative. I mean, you don't innovate on prices or on a stock information. Maybe you can, but commerce is much more boring. It's something that has to be secure, has to be reliable, fast, but is less. It's much more stable. It's much more something for developers and for engineers. The content part belongs to the creatives. Is much more fun. Is content is king. They say so, and I will leave it to you. But this is again, in my opinion. Managing two different things like content and commerce with the same tool doesn't make much sense today.
I agree. I mean, why use both in one when you might not need them at the same time? And the same applies for us in content. I mean, if I look at GraphCMS, and I'm very impressed with a lot of what our customers build because it's beyond what even I would think of what a CMS can do when you think about it as your content backend. And in a majority of cases, most content use cases don't necessarily need commerce, even though everything is transactional now. And in a lot of commerce cases, you don't need content taking the foreground in what a commerce system should do. And having everything go directly API first and integrate with one another, I think that's definitely the way forward. So fully with you.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Also, if you look at the history, the headless content came before headless commerce, and also in a project, what we see very often is that brands and the companies start embracing the headless approach, starting from content, and eventually they add e-commerce afterward. And this is perfectly doable. I mean, with Commerce Layer or with any API first commerce platform, you can enrich your content experience and make it shoppable. So it's something that also makes sense for the granular approach and the step-by-step approach that you were mentioning before.
Got it. Love it. Yeah, fully with you on this. And I think that was the last question. So I think we've covered a lot of ground on this. There's a lot of points to take away on how you can really start to build out better e-commerce experiences and keep the performance without sacrificing on personalization or vice versa. I think the stack really starts to make a lot of sense in this case. But I've loved this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on this. And I'll go ahead and keep our socials on the screen. So if anyone wants to get in touch with either of us, feel free to do so. I mean, Commerce Layer, fantastic headless commerce platform, VWO, fantastic A/B testing and personalization, and GraphCMS, well, fantastic content management. So
Yeah.
perfect. Thanks a lot, both of you. Really appreciated this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronak. Thanks, everyone.